Before we get into it, you need to know that everything you're about to hear is completely and totally real.
Believe it or not,
This is the story of how a group of online friends went from modding the original Xbox to stealing millions of dollars in intellectual property. How a group of hackers jokingly calling themselves Xbox Underground became international criminals and broke into military servers. The group made a small fortune by modding and hacking consoles, as well as selling stolen games before it all came crashing down on them. Today we're talking about the bizarre story of the Xbox Underground team and how their crimes were brought to the surface. Let's go! The focal point of this story is David Pecora, who was a teenager when the original Xbox first gained popularity in the gaming scene. Microsoft's first console was flawed in some pretty key ways though. An easy entry point into the world of hacking and modding. This rabbit hole would go pretty deep, and eventually led to Pecora hacking private networks, selling fake Xboxes, and even aiding in the theft of Xbox prototypes. Before all that, though, Pecora got into console hacking the same way most people do. He looked up tutorials online, started checking a few forums, and eventually contributing to those spaces. Before long, he learned that it was pretty easy to trick the original Xbox into running homebrew software, and his career as a hacker began. Now a part of this community, Pecora started messing around with games like the Xbox's flagship Halo series. He broke it and rebuilt it however he wanted, changing how collisions worked, adjusting damage modifiers, and essentially made it a brand new game. He even started creating tutorials on how other hackers could replicate his changes, and quickly became a prominent hacker in the gaming hacking scene. Of course, he also started messing around with what the original Xbox could do as well. By altering the console's firmware, he could make it run Linux and other operating systems that offered more freedom to users. He was also able to make the system run emulations of games from Nintendo and Sega systems. Oh yeah, this was in 2002, so the Sega Dreamcast was still just barely a thing. All of this was relatively harmless, and back in those days, there weren't many ways people could profit off of this kind of hacking. Sure, Pecora and his compatriots were violating the Xbox's terms of use, but it was for the sake of getting the most out of their favorite hobby. This kind of ingenuity could maybe even get them a job developing video games someday. Then, things started to escalate with the release of the Xbox 360. Learning from its mistakes with the original Xbox, Microsoft made this system much harder to hack. To modify the 360 on the same level as the OG Xbox, someone would need to use a dev kit that had access to debugging tools. These were nearly impossible to come by until a man going by Rowdy Van Cleve found a literal pile of them at a literal garbage dump. Pecora bought one of these dev kit motherboards and started modding Halo 3. His efforts earned him a fair amount of online fame, and he began collaborating with another hacker named Anthony Clark. They created modded Halo 3 matches that gave Master Chief godlike powers and played with these rules in servers only available to people with dev kits. Eventually, Microsoft and Bungie caught wind of their hacking and gave them a lighthearted but firm warning to stop. Pecora and company laughed this off though, and continued to mess around with their Xbox 360s. Little did they know though that the perfect storm was brewing for their hacking careers to skyrocket. Since it was so much harder to hack the 360 than the first Xbox, those skills became more highly valued. Of course, thousands of people had also become used to playing hacked or modded versions of games on Xbox systems, thanks to the original's flimsy security. Many were even willing to pay hackers for the ability to play games with modified rule sets and abilities. The real kicker, though, is how all of this coincided with the explosion of the online gaming scene. In the months following the 360's release, gaming went from a hobby mostly shared through couch co-op to one that was mostly experienced online. This means that some unsavory gamers were suddenly motivated to play multiplayer games with hacked characters and easily best the competition. In short, the demand for hacked games and consoles increased even more than the barrier to entry for that experience. So long as Pecora and company were willing to bend their morals as much as their Xboxes, they were in a position where they could suddenly make a lot of money from their hobby, which they did. They started selling Xbox 360 hacks, and things started spiraling out of control almost immediately. Pecora and friends started creating modded lobbies where, for a fee, people could play Call of Duty matches with superpowers. Much to Activision's annoyance, some COD matches suddenly had players flying through the air or only taking damage from very specific actions. Things became even more morally gray when Pecora started selling these specific buffs to individuals. Instead of an entire match being filled with super soldiers, now one player could easily wipe out an entire enemy team by themselves. That's right, Pecora and the rest of Xbox Underground played a direct role in hackers becoming more prevalent in online shooters. While they were ruining some people's gaming experience, they were also making upwards of $8,000 a day from selling these hacks and running these lobbies. Activision obviously sent them cease and desist orders, but those were largely ignored. Between the money, fame/infamy, and success of turning a hobby into a career at such a young age, Pecora and team began to grow bolder. When another hacker, Dylan Wheeler, approached them with Epic Games credentials that he had procured, the team jumped at the opportunity. They quickly located all the passwords for Epic Games' internal network and soon had access to everything in the system. With the help of hacker Sonodode Sonic Neshiwat, they even managed to download an unreleased copy of Gears of War 3. This, of course, was textbook theft, and the FBI even became involved when the game showed up on BitTorrent sites. The FBI's investigation definitely spooked Pecora and company, but it eventually died down. If anything, this investigation only emboldened Pecora and his fellow hackers. They convinced themselves that if the FBI couldn't catch them for this, then they were basically untouchable. They started making even bigger moves and completely threw their already shaky ethics out the window. Case in point, Pecora stole the code for a pre-release version of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and sold copies of it online for several $100s. He and his team had gone from a group of passionate Xbox gamers to people who directly profited from the theft of games. This, of course, would only continue to escalate. Another hacker in the group, Nathan LaRue, discovered that he could create fake in-game currency in the soccer game FIFA 2012. This would allow players to get access to better characters much more quickly, and the team immediately started selling these fake coins. The team also ended up hacking into a US Army server and accessed a simulation for a new model of Apache helicopters currently in development. Even if they didn't do anything with this simulation, this was a federal crime and akin to stealing United States military secrets. Things don't even come close to ending here, though. Pecora's group also managed to steal the specs for the, at the time, upcoming Xbox One. Using this information, they built their own version of the Xbox One prototype and tried to sell it. Their first prototype was likely stopped by customs agents when they tried to ship it, and the second had its auction canceled by eBay. If the eBay sale had gone through, though, Xbox Underground would have made $21,000 from that single transaction. At around this time, though, hacker LaRue went totally dark. The team reasoned that his home was probably raided by the FBI, and rather than dial down their actions, they decided to encrypt their hard drives. Even in the face of tangible consequences, the Xbox Underground team doubled down on their illegal efforts. Many of them focused more on their own projects, with Clark expanding the FIFA coin hustle and Pecora creating an Xbox cheating service. One of their associates, Arman, even straight up stole an Xbox One by breaking into Microsoft headquarters. It's clear that at this point, Pecora and his team thought that they were invincible, that their meteoric rise to the forefront of the Xbox hacking scene somehow made them immune to the consequences of their actions. Or maybe they believed that they were so good at what they were doing that they couldn't possibly ever get caught. Reaching such grand heights, though, only made their fall all the steeper and harder. In early 2014, the Xbox Underground team finally had to face the mess they had made. On a trip to the US to pick up a custom part for his car, Pecora was arrested at the US-Canada border. Soon after, the majority of the Xbox Underground team were also arrested. While some team members were minors and only escaped with misdemeanor charges, others were staring down loftier sentences. Pecora and LaRue in particular faced a 16-count indictment. These charges ranged from identity theft to wire fraud and even included the illegal sale of trade secrets. The team didn't have much of a defense. After all, once their accounts were identified, there were several instances online of them admitting to and bragging about these crimes. The best their legal teams could do was paint them as impassioned young people who let their enthusiasm for their hobby run out of control. They claimed that they never meant to hurt anyone, and instead became kind of obsessed with how far they could push their hacking. This defense only went so far, though, and Pecora and LaRue were sentenced to 18 and 24 months in prison, respectively. Both accepted their sentences with relatively little contest. Pecora in particular made his peace with paying the piper and became committed to leading a more honest life. All the members of Xbox Underground are out of prison now, and for the most part are pretty well adjusted. While most of them have had to give up on ever working in the gaming industry, they've continued their education and likely have promising careers in the software development ahead of them. Although one challenge many of them face is that most of their best work is now inaccessible. The FBI still has their hard drives on lockdown and probably won't return any of their hacking tools anytime soon. It's difficult to say where exactly the Xbox Underground team went wrong, where their hobby turned into a kind of obsession. All the money they were bringing in certainly didn't help things de-escalate, but it's also clear that the desire to be the best at something, a common feeling in gaming, also played a role here. These young people wanted to see how far they could go, how much they could push their hacking skills, and what they could turn their talent into. The answer was an impressive but fleeting Xbox hacking empire that seemed to embody every aspect of the hacking community. So even if it was only for a short time, and we cannot recommend that anyone do this, it's fair to say that their efforts took them to the top of console hacking. What do you think of what might be the wildest story in video game hacking? Please let us know in the comments down below, and of course, don't try any of this yourself. What you can do though is like this video and subscribe to The Gamer. We have more wild gaming stories coming soon, and you're not going to want to miss a single one of them. Thanks for watching.